Today, the world sounds different. If you listen carefully, you'll hear consumers clamoring for more representation and support. For years, our demands for more diversity have fallen on deaf ears. But the landscape is changing. As we enter a new era, it is important that we ask ourselves, is our industry representing America's voice? We live in a nation of 331 million people, half of which are women. And while the gap between women and men in front and behind the screen is closing, there's still a lot of progress to be made. In 2019, women were cast for 44% of lead roles in films and represented 40% of top 8 actors. Yet they only make up 17% of film writers and 15% of film directors. At Pandora, we noticed how women were widely underrepresented in audio, so we decided that it was time to make a change.
This year, we launched Pandora Presents Pass the Mic, which is a B2B marketing campaign that aims to empower and uplift women within the audio and advertising industries. And we felt it was imperative to highlight all of these incredible women within this space in order to do our part in finding a way to bridge the gender gap. So you ask, how do we start this process? Well, we started by listening. During our research, we found that women represent just 15% of executives at record labels, 14% of songwriters, and 5% of audio engineers and producers, respectively. And we all are very aware of the plight that women, and even more specifically, women of color within the advertising and marketing industries face. Now, a number of companies, agencies, and publishers have recognized these hurdles, and they've set aggressive diversity goals in order to take the necessary steps to diversify their workforce. However, these goals have been proven to only benefit one or two underrepresented groups. And the importance of hiring and really ultimately maintaining women of color for advertisers and marketers, it gets completely lost. So because of that, we felt like it was time to invite more women to the soundboard, to the stage, and ultimately to the table. It was time for us to pass the mic. We felt like it was our duty to elevate these important voices within our industry. So from advertising executives to podcast hosts, musicians, and beyond, the women we have highlighted and continue to highlight are blazing a trail for others to speak up and ultimately get the tools, skills, and actionable insights they need in order to get their seat at the table. And speaking of seats, one of the common themes across the board that came through some of the 70 plus brave women who have shared their stories with us in the form of podcasts, interviews, articles, and even mini mics was that it is not enough for you to have your seat at the table, but it's even more imperative that once you do, that you pull up a chair for the next woman beside you who comes after you. So I'll leave you with this. How will you pass the mic?
Our friends at Dentsu also saw an opportunity to highlight the state of women's equality in the US. They partnered with SiriusXM to understand consumers' attitudes around the importance, progress, and barriers to gender equality.
The SiriusXM mission is to accurately portray all women and girls in marketing, advertising, media, and entertainment, so they see themselves as they truly all are in their potential. Dentsu very much shares an unwavering commitment to the same mission. And as a leader in the advertising industry, Dentsu is acutely aware of how representation shapes norms and perception of reality. So given our shared values, SiriusXM and Dentsu decided to collaborate on a proprietary research study that we entitled Perceptions of Progress: The State of Women's Equality in the US. We surveyed a nationally representative sample of about 800 men and women to understand attitudes around the importance, progress, and barriers to gender equality. Both Dentsu and SiriusXM are keenly aware of the power of concrete data and actionable insight to impact and inspire lasting change. So in conducting the study, we wanted to probe on a number of questions and issues. Is gender equality an equally important issue for men as it is for women? What is the sense of progress against gender equality and what barriers remain? Do members of different ethnicities experience and perceive gender equality differently, and if so, how? And how can marketers play a role in advancing the cause of gender equality? So we hope that the findings from the study will help illuminate the actions we can take to further the cause of equality, both as members of the marketing community and as individuals.
As Dirk mentioned, part of our research explores how Americans view the state of women's representation. Today's consumers do recognize that media plays a powerful role in shaping how women and girls see themselves and in how society views them. Our research uncovered that 52% of both men and women say media has a lot of responsibility to improve gender equality. This charge stems from a particularly strong perception that media is a change agent. 81% of respondents agree that media plays a crucial role in shaping gender roles. And further, 84% agree that media has the power to teach children that girls can do anything that boys can do. Yet, consumers feel media is not living up to its potential. On average, only 32% of respondents feel media usually portrays women accurately. While men tend to have a more optimistic view at 39%, for women, this number drops to just 25%. Black women feel even more pessimistic about representation, with just 18% feeling that media accurately portrays women. The biggest issue consumers currently see with representation appears to be a failure to fully capture women's capabilities, with 72% of respondents saying they typically see women portrayed by media as attractive rather than accomplished. To us, there's a clear tie between the issues in representation and the barriers to equality that women continue to face. We just heard that the objectification of women is a persisting issue in media representations. And in fact, harassment is reported as the #1 barrier to equality among women. And it's a particular issue for Black women.
Media plays a huge role in the way we perceive people of diverse backgrounds. And unfortunately, they continue to be widely underrepresented in front and behind the screen. People of color make up 40% of the US population, but only 28% of lead roles, 33% of top 8 actors, 10% of film writers, and 19% of film directors. The same is happening in the advertising industry, and multicultural consumers are taking notice. A study by Adobe showed that 59% of whites feel represented in advertising, but that number drops significantly for people of color.
African American people are rarely represented in advertising, and when they do, it's only one specific look of African American. We come in all different colors, shapes, sizes, and hair textures, but it is never represented the way it should be. We are often overlooked and not recognized at all.
This is equally true for Hispanics who often feel overlooked in the ads they come across. A recent Pandora study asked if companies are doing a good job of connecting with the Hispanic consumer. 52% of Hispanics said that they're not.
Brands and companies see us as a monolith. They aren't able to get past tropes and tired storylines. I have yet to see any TV show that speaks to the nuances of our experiences and the true diversity and tensions of the Latinx community.
When companies try to reach Hispanic audiences, they tend to only focus on stereotypes. Otherwise, all of their marketing is in Spanish. There's a real connection with ordinary Hispanic American consumers.
This lack of representation negatively impacts how people of color are perceived by others and has an adverse effect on how people of color see themselves. One study looked at the impact that media could have on how whites perceive people of color. The study found that nonverbal cues, as seen on popular TV shows, influence whites' viewers' racial biases. These viewers, who have not had any direct interaction with particular racial groups, substitute these stereotypes, the ones that they see on screen, for reality. A lack of representation has also been connected to a decrease in self-esteem for young girls and young Black males, and an increase in self-esteem for young white males. This is driven by the industry's propensity to cast only white men as heroes, while completely erasing other groups or just reducing them as villains and sidekicks. We at Pandora are trying to do our part in redefining the advertising industry's notion of the general American voice. Our goal is to better reflect the rich spectrum of voices we hear in our communities.
Looking back at the first half of 2020, about 90% of voice casting requests we received didn't specify a race or ethnicity for voice casting. And in about 93% of those cases, our audio producers cast white voices. Why? Because it was the default and we didn't challenge it. We didn't want to rock the boat. This year, we decided to evaluate the ways we can and should be doing better. For us, that started with default voice casting. Beginning in June, we implemented a new casting policy that when no race or ethnicity is specified in a client request, we now cast voices of color at least half of the time. And guess what? Advertisers and audiences didn't bat an eyelash. It's really not that revolutionary. We just needed the jolt to challenge an outdated way of thinking.
Look, it is no secret that our consumers want to be represented. 66% of Black Pandora listeners have said that they want to see ads with people who look like them. And Hispanics, Asian Americans, and LGBTQ+ listeners have told us that they feel proud and empowered when they see positive representation in media as well as other fields. As marketers, it is our responsibility to be a part of the solution.
Our research found that women feel strongly about the power of representation to create change. They most want brands to increase female leadership in boardrooms, but also want brands to improve representation in their advertising. They believe that ads can impact real-world change when women see more female role models cast in leadership roles. Marketers have a particular responsibility to restore agency to women of color. Hispanic and Latinx women especially expect brands to step in as supportive allies. They are more likely than other cohorts to want brands to donate to organizations dedicated to female advancement, support female employees, and champion women's work in underrepresented industries. They also want to see a more diverse cast of characters represented in advertising. When speaking to Black women, brands need to build back trust. Black women most want brands to improve portrayals of women in advertising by showing them in more realistic scenarios. Often when the experiences of Black women are visible, they follow a one-dimensional narrative or are in supporting roles. It is time to advocate for diversity among crews and marketing and media teams to ensure the authentic representation of all women.
Multicultural consumers across the board want brands to go all in.
That is correct, Nidia. The tide is turning. Consumers no longer view brands as mere providers of products and services, but as entities capable of shaping our cultural and social context. Consumers have heightened expectations of brands to be more and mean more, and the COVID crisis has only accelerated that trend. We know from our Dentsu Navigator survey, which is a monthly sentiment tracker, that almost half of consumers are paying more attention to what brands are doing these days in response to the crisis to support individuals, communities, and employees. And that 57% of US adults feel brands should use their influence to stand up for social issues, including racial and gender equality. Consumers in general, but especially Gen Z and millennials, also are ever more mindful of the role brands are playing in the larger cultural ecosystem. And brand reputation is increasingly tied to brands' action and behavior regarding social issues. As a matter of fact, our data shows that 53% of consumers explicitly chose to purchase a brand because it did take a stand on an issue that aligns with their values. And conversely, 40% stopped purchasing a brand because that brand stayed silent on an issue that mattered to them. So staying silent increasingly is no longer an option for a brand. So to stay relevant and maintain brand affinity, marketers should ensure that they are meeting consumers' needs and expectations around concerns like gender and racial equality.
Hispanics, for instance, want to see the full spectrum of their community in the advertising they see. This desire to be seen has fueled a fire among Indigenous and Afro-Latinos who have long been left out of the Hispanic conversation. Hispanics also want brands to understand that their identity is multidimensional and that it is worthy of recognition and respect. Asian Americans want brands to make an honest effort to represent the culture the right way. LGBTQ+ Americans, they want marketers to tap into their diverse spectrum of values, history, narratives, and norms. And Black Americans, well, they want brands to stand up for the community, to show genuine support, and to not shy away from including that support in their advertising.
Brands and companies should produce more advertisements that depict racial diversity in a caring way. Advertisements that show that they want everyone to use or wear their products.
For marketers, representing America's voice is a win-win. Multicultural consumers agree that ads that feature their community get their attention better than ads that don't. Many of these consumers also feel that these companies deserve their business more than companies that don't make an effort. The world is listening. Now is the time to reflect the diversity of our nation. Pandora recently published a definitive guide to audio, where we look at today's soundscape and highlight the latest consumer trends. Are you ready to adjust your sound?
Whoa.